What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Eye on the U, the Miami Herald show about the Miami Hurricanes. I'm your host, Andre Fernandez, joined once again by Jordan McPherson, our beat writer, back for another week and another Hurricanes victory as this team just continues to roll on, continues to stay undefeated. So with that goose egg in the loss column, and we'll talk a little bit about how it happened. Again, another comeback, another game where Miami had to rally from a double-digit deficit to keep that record undefeated. We'll see how that happened. Cam Ward, Xavier Restrepo, both setting records. Had an injury on the cornerback front, which is not good. That unit takes another hit right there. But Miami's offense, Jordan, just continues to roll. It's the big reason why they're never out of games. We'll talk about that. And we'll talk about, of course, it's finally time. The college football playoff rankings have come out, and Miami is right there in the top four. Kind of what people expected, but at the same time, it's good to see that AP ranking translated into having them in the football playoff poll in that top four, setting things up pretty well for them if they run the table. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And Georgia Tech. We all know what happened last year. Miami going to Atlanta this weekend. Obviously, they don't want a repeat of anything even remotely like that to keep this season going. And that shakeup in the ACC finally happened, with a couple of those previously unbeaten conference teams going down. So we'll take a look at the big picture and how it also sets up well for Miami. But let's start with that Duke game. Manny Diaz in town. A lot of emotions riding high in that game and looking dangerous again for a minute there until Miami just opened it up in the second half, as they tend to do with Cam Ward, and just blew out the Blue Devils toward the end of that game. And 9-0.
Yeah, 9-0. And again, when you look at what the final score was, 53-31, it's hard to think that they were actually down by 11 early in the third quarter. Because, again, just that offense once again lit it up. The defense, for all of its faults, all of the errors that it makes, for some reason in the fourth quarter, it just finds ways to lock things down, finds ways to make the needed adjustments. But, yeah, Miami was down 28-17 after the first drive of the third quarter. First 3 drives for that Miami defense gave up 5 total yards, 2 3-and-outs, and an interception on the first play. And then Duke, boom, 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 boom. 4 consecutive touchdown drives of at least 75 yards. 3 of them were elongated drives, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 plays. The first of those, it was just 4 big plays that set up a touchdown. But then Cam Ward does Cam Ward things. Xavier Restrepo does Xavier Restrepo things. The defense overall, they forced 4 turnovers, which gave the offense short fields on all 4 occasions, which helped get some of those quick drives that they needed for the comeback. But again, third time in 5 ACC games, they've trailed by at least 10 points in the second half. Remember, they were down 10 multiple times against Virginia Tech. We all know that 25-point comeback against Cal on the West Coast. And now to do it again, it was, again, there's a reason why, if this team has time and the offense gets a chance to have the ball in its hands, it's hard to bet against this team just because we've seen what this offense has been able to do time and again.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you don't feel worried. At least I didn't feel that worried in this case because I've seen it happen before. And this offense, we've talked about it. Statistically, is historically good right now for Miami. I mean, tops in the nation in multiple categories. When you have an offense that good, you're not worried about it. You know the points will come. And that's why I was like, even at 28-17, you're like, okay. The only thing was there was a little more riding on this game, obviously, not just the undefeated record and all that, but you did not want to lose to your former coach. No offense to Manny Diaz, but you can't lose that game after you let him go years ago, brought in Mario, everything got rebuilt in the way they wanted. That would have been too much of an embarrassment for them to drop that game. So that was the only sense of, not this week. Like, of all weeks, not this week. But yeah, again, Miami's defense is the one that you wish could lock down a little bit more consistently early on. But you're never worried about that offense.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And the thing is, with that defense, I wrote a story about it earlier this week, just trying to break down where things are going. And it's the second quarter where they're giving up the most points. I believe the number was in conference play. They're giving up about 32 points in conference play. Obviously not ideal. The bulk of that has come in the second quarter. And then once they shift to the second half, they've only, in the fourth quarters this year in conference play, they have held every opponent except for Louisville to 7 points or less in the fourth quarter. And meanwhile, the offense has been one of the best teams in the country in the fourth quarter. So when you have that complementariness of the defense finally figuring out how to make stops late and the offense just erupting late, that's a good recipe for success. Obviously, if the defense can start out quicker and come out with that intensity and not have to figure things out on the fly, that obviously would be the best case scenario. But so far this year, this defense has figured things out. And when it goes to the locker room at halftime, it figures out what it needs to fix once they get back out there for the second half. That I give Lance Guidry a lot of credit for that, for how he's been able to get things adjusted later in games. But again, it just goes back to there's only so many times they can go through this before it becomes a time where the offense doesn't have a great fourth quarter, or the defense tries to make the adjustments and it doesn't work. So they need to figure out a way to still get that complete game. And through 9 games, we haven't seen that, but ultimately they've been able to do enough to be able to keep that loss column at 0.
Yeah, and they still have 2 road games, unranked teams or not. They're going to go to Atlanta, not easy there, and then the last one at Syracuse. But what worries me in the long term, the short term, but also the long term, and this will segue. We'll talk later about the rankings and where Miami stands. But if Miami wants to get where they want to get to this year, you cannot do that against a Tennessee or a Texas or someone that they could get matched up with potentially if Miami does make it to the playoff and is matched up in the quarterfinals. We already saw the bracket as of right now. It could be, they're in that number 4 seed in the poll. Could end up being against a powerhouse SEC team, or who knows if there's an upset. It looks like that right now, at least in the positioning it is right now. Everything's going to move around, but let's say they get a Boise State with a running back like Genty, and he wallops them early. They just can't. The point is they just can't afford to keep burying themselves like that. They're digging their way out now because their offense is great. But, against stronger competition, should they get to the playoff, and obviously we're getting ahead of ourselves, they have to win 4 more games to make sure they get there. And let's be honest, in the ACC championship game, I'm overlooking that part too. Right now, and we're going to talk about that later too, right now setting up where it could be them and SMU, let's say, that's an explosive offense too. You don't want to spot them 20, 30 points right out of the chute, and then you're trying to dig your way out.
Yeah, agree. And with that defense, especially with where they are in the cornerbacks in the secondary right now, again, they've been without Damari Brown basically all year. Jadaeus Richard went down, had to get carted off in the fourth quarter. Looked like a really bad knee injury. Mario Cristobal described it as a significant injury. So who knows if we see him again this year. Damari Brown is hopefully going to be back before the regular season ends. Miami has a bye week after this week. So there's a chance that we could see him in either the Wake Forest or the Syracuse game. But with both of those guys out, Miami doesn't really have a lot of depth when it comes to its corners. You've got obviously Daryl Porter on one side. OJ Frederick is going to be your other main guy. Deani Hill, the Marshall transfer, is going to be getting a lot of significant reps. Beyond that, it's a lot of unproven guys unless they move Mish Powell from safety to nickel and then have Markeith Williams and Zaquan Patterson holding on the spot that Mish Powell had at safety. So there's going to be a lot of moving parts. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle that dynamic. But beyond the secondary, the rest of the defense needs to basically step up a lot more to make sure that secondary isn't under the pressure. The D-line definitely needs to start stepping up a lot more. They only had 1 sack against Duke, and it was very late in the game. They had 3 sacks against FSU, but all 3 of them came in the second half when FSU was forced to be more pass-friendly, more pass-heavy, and it set up situations that ultimately helped the pass rush, knowing that, okay, we know where they're going to be passing, so we can just execute that way. They didn't have to really rely on having to stop the run. So, and this defensive line, it has the talent to be able to do that. Obviously, you have Ruben Bain, who's Ruben Bain. Simeon Barrow's having a career year. Akeem Mesidor is finally figuring things out on the inside. Tyler Barron has been great opposite Bain on the other end, on the other outside spot on the defensive line. This group should be producing a lot more tackles for loss and a lot more sacks than it has the last couple of weeks. And they need to figure that part out quickly, because if you give an opposing quarterback, whoever it may be, enough time to throw against that secondary, that can spur some trouble there.
Right, and that's the thing. This defense, the way it was built coming into the season, you knew they were going to, the front 4 or the front, just the linebackers, everybody was going to have to put pressure to ease up a little bit of that perceived weakness, which it's turned out to be in the secondary. And you're right, if they're not doing that, especially if they face down the road, face dual threat quarterbacks that can victimize your secondary even more, which they might. That's going to be a problem. But real quick, just to wrap up the comeback win over Duke, also Restrepo and Ward. Jordan, take us through what the records they set. Those guys, again, obviously amazing. I know Miami's favorite sideline guest, Michael Irvin, is having a blast every week looking at them in person.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So I'll start with Cam Ward, second 5 passing touchdown game of the season. His 5th touchdown, which went to Restrepo, was his 29th of the season through 9 games. That's already tied for the single season record with Steve Walsh from 1988. Again, 9 games, 29 touchdown passes. And remember, he didn't have a touchdown pass against FSU. So he had, so his next touchdown pass, his 30th, will set the single season record. Restrepo, 8 catches, I believe it was 146 or 164 yards, 3 touchdowns. The final touchdown, 66 yards from Ward to Restrepo. Restrepo tied the school record for career catches and set the school record for career receiving yards. He passed Santana Moss for the receiving yards, and his next catch will surpass Mike Harley for career receptions. He also has 19 career touchdown catches now, 9 of them this season. If he gets 7 more this season, which there's enough time for him to do that, he'll tie Michael Irvin for the career touchdown catches to 26. Again, Restrepo, and most of the stuff for Restrepo has come in the past 2 years. His first 2 years, he was basically a non-factor. He got hurt and missed a decent amount of time his 3rd year. And then last year, 85 catches, almost 1,100 yards. And then this year, through 9 games, he's already at 850-some yards. He also, the other stat for Restrepo that really stood out to me when I started crunching through the numbers over the weekend, if he gets another 150 yards, he'll be the first receiver ever to have multiple 1,000-yard seasons as a Hurricane. And the thing about all of the guys who have come through here, the fact that he will be the first to do that is just absolutely remarkable. It's a testament to just what he went through, his perseverance, his ability to stay the course, his desire to stay. Because again, he could have taken the easy way out after those first 3 years where it's not a lot of playing time, injury, coaching change, all of that. Remember, he was a Manny Diaz recruit. Manny Diaz signed him to be part of this team. He easily could have said, yeah, I'm done. I'm going to go somewhere else where I know I'll get the opportunity. He stayed the course, and now he has the record. He's in the record books. He's been a veteran presence on this team. And to see the chemistry between him and Ward, how quickly they were able to develop it. Again, Ward got here in the spring. The fact that they were able to get this much chemistry over the span of 8-9 months is just absolutely remarkable, and a key reason why they are where they are.
Yeah. I also like the chemistry between him and, speaking of, Michael Irvin on the sideline. Every time he makes a big play or touchdown, I think wasn't Irvin giving him like little pecks on the forehead the other day. Almost like it was almost like a father-son thing. It was pretty cool. Like, so Mike, the playmaker is going to be happy if Restrepo breaks some of these marks, continues to break some of these marks for sure. And with the illustrious history at the receiver position, at the quarterback position, what these guys are doing, pretty special right now. The pretty special part that I know they and the Hurricanes fans want to see is Miami continue to stay the course for a few more weeks and get into this playoff. The first rankings came out this week. Oregon number 1, Ohio State 2. We know Oregon beat them by a point when they met earlier this year. Georgia at number 3, and there's those Canes at number 4. It's going to move around, like we said, but kind of cool to just see that name up there. For years, fans were only dreaming about the fact that Miami could actually be that highly ranked in that playoff picture, especially when it was a top 4. Now being a top 12. If it ended right now, I mean, the 5-12 matchup is those Hook'em Horns from Texas against Boise State. So, and obviously, like you said.
Actually, Andre, I've got to stop you there. Remember, the rankings aren't the seedings. Remember.
Oh, the rankings aren't the seedings. That's right. See, I'm caught up and doing this wrong.
No, again,
I'm
this
excited
is all
already.
It's a lot of chaos. Remember, regardless of what the rankings are, the top 4 conference champions are the 1 through 4 seed for the playoffs.
Well,
so
I figured,
so
if Miami wins the ACC, they're there.
But the thing about, remember, Oregon and Ohio State are both in the Big 12. So or Big 10, sorry.
Someone's going to get
beat,
for sure.
Even though if the season ended today and these were the rankings, and we just say the highest seed for each conference, or the highest ranking for each conference is the conference champion, Ohio State, despite being ranked number 2, will be the 5 seed because they're not a conference champion. So with that, the top 4 in terms of the seeding, it's Ohio State 1, it's Georgia 2, Miami 3, and then BYU is the number 9 in the rankings, would be the number 4 seed because they're the highest in the Big 12.
That's right. I did see that.
So
That
that's where everything gets up. So Miami, as the number 4 ranked team, would be the number 3 seed. They would face the 6-11 matchup, which, as of this week's rankings, would be the winner of Texas Alabama. Again, the ranking versus the seeding is going to be confusing, especially early on. Every week, I'm doing a breakdown with what the rankings are and what the seedings are. And again, all of these things are going to move. The SEC, there's so many matchups among the top teams that still have to go against each other. So there's going to be a lot of movement throughout. But the main thing to remember, top 4 conference champions, regardless of what the ranking is, get 1 through 4. And then the fifth highest ranked conference champion, wherever they're ranked, gets a spot in the playoffs. If they're in the top 12, they'll get whatever their ranking is. If they're, say, anywhere from 13 to 25, they would automatically be the number 12 seed for the playoffs. And then everybody else is just decided by the rankings.
I just wanted you to explain it to everybody. That's all. There you go. But even more. Let's play that hypothetical. Texas and Alabama, 2 teams you do not want to fall behind against. For sure, when we're talking about the tougher competition. But again, Miami being there where they are, 3 seed. Let's say they do win the ACC. I mean, it projects pretty well for them. And an intriguing game, an intriguing potential game against either one of these SEC powerhouses, or who knows, maybe, one of these teams that is right there on the fringe. But plenty to go through before that. Georgia Tech being first and foremost. You do not want to mess this one up. You do not want to. Miami's full attention on the Yellow Jackets, especially because, again, it's almost like a series of games that you do not especially want to lose. FSU, for obvious reasons. Manny Diaz last week with Duke. Now here comes the game, the infamous game from last year, with the kneel down, with the lack of kneel down, and how it all changed. And I'm sure Miami wants to erase that memory and make a much better memory in Atlanta against Georgia Tech. Take us through this matchup, Jordan. What are the Hurricanes facing, and what are they going to have to deal with out in Atlanta?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I do want to say each of Miami's last 3 games, they have taken the kneel down. So they've learned. Although the Louisville game, the first of those 3, Cam Ward had to take 3 kneel downs. He fumbled on the second one. They recovered it, but me and the Sun Sentinel writer, Adam Lichtenstein, we both looked at each other when we heard fumble on the play. We both looked at each other and went, what?
Not again.
Do we have to ask Mario if they're repping it during practice, or if they need to practice it more? But yeah, who knew? Yeah, but obviously we all remember what happened with that. Miami was undefeated going into that Georgia Tech game last year, and then we saw how everything snowballed after that loss. Everything
was a season changer, completely.
Everything completely unraveled, and it's kind of funny when we were asking about that on Monday. Somebody brings up to defense coordinator Lance Guidry, goes, "So Georgia Tech," and he just starts vamping for 30 seconds, trying to ask him, having to rehash last year. He ultimately answered it and basically talked about how the team has evolved from the year over, but it's like, yeah, so Georgia Tech goes, so again, we were able to recover against Duke. We were able to do well. We're doing this and that. Anybody want to talk about the weather outside? It's just like to see again. But again, this team, we've seen how different this year's team is from last year's team. This team is a lot more poised. This team is a lot more cognizant of the situations. Obviously, Mario Cristobal is cognizant of what happened last year. Back at the beginning of the season, Cristobal mentioned that they have a time management coach. One of the assistant coaches is also doubling as a time management coach, which is helping them to make sure situations like what happened last year don't arise again. They're hoping it doesn't have to come to that against Georgia Tech this weekend. And in terms of Georgia Tech themselves, another defense similar to Duke. They're up in the top third in the nation. They're a good defense. They have guys who are able to get into the backfield. They have guys who can get some tackles for losses. The main question for them is offensively. Their quarterback, Haynes King, didn't play last week. His status is still up in the air. And if they don't have him going, that could be a game changer for the Hurricanes in terms of the defense maybe getting a little bit of a breather going against an inexperienced quarterback, and then just hoping the offense is able to continue doing what it's doing.
Yeah, and the offense, again, got to come out, got to score some points, but obviously got to hold and got to have a better second quarter. I mean, remember the the way the team sometimes would come out in the third quarter and have issues coming out of halftime. Now it seems to be that just the second
Yeah,
quarter.
now
Just a
they're
lull.
giving the third quarter issues to the Heat now, so that's all.
The quote unquote third quarter that the fans used to joke about. But let's see if they can come out with a little better of a start and then get this one and put them at 10-0. After that, a bye week for Miami, and then Wake at home, Syracuse on the road. And if they're 12-0, you're looking at the ACC championship game, which now a little more clarity to that picture after this past week. I know the last couple of weeks we've been keeping an eye on the undefeated conference teams. Well, guess what? There's only 2 left. One of them's the Hurricanes, and those SMU Mustangs.
You called it, Andre.
Crushed.
You called it.
Yep. There you go. I had a feeling they just have their offense is so explosive. They're similar to Miami. They're just a team that could put up 40, 50 points, but can also give up a lot of points too. I mean, I honestly, that game is going to be, everyone will think it'll be a shootout if it happens. But they came out and they crushed Pitt. I mean, there's been a lot of games in this conference this year for everybody, top to bottom, that have been nail biters. But once in a while, there's been a blowout, and SMU really stuck it to Pitt, an unbeaten Pitt team, knocked them out of it, looked dominant. And how about Louisville? I mean, Louisville looked like they were due for a win like that. They've been close. They were close against Miami. They were close against SMU. They've had, some nail biters themselves this year. Came out on the losing end of all of them until Saturday. They go into Death Valley and look pretty impressive. Not only in their case, shutting down Clemson and getting key stops in that game, and then the running of Isaac Brown, local guy from Homestead High, looking great once again. And Louisville pulls it off, knocks Clemson from the ACC unbeaten ranks, deals them a tough second loss, which likely damages big time their chances of making the playoffs. But overall, the ACC picture now for all these teams, Jordan, what do you think?
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. Now you're at the point where, again, for UM and SMU, it's simple. Win and you're in. Again, you mentioned UM's schedule. They've got Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and Syracuse. SMU schedule the rest of the way, Boston College, Virginia, and Cal. And Virginia's the only one of those 3 on the road. So SMU's got a pretty good path as well. So, and again, SMU's been having an incredible season. Their only loss, 18-15 against BYU. And again, BYU's proving themselves. They're one of the 5 undefeated teams left in college football.
Yeah. And at the time, I remember at the time people were like, they lost that game, and now you look back on it, you're like, they lost that game.
Exactly. Yeah. No, again, their only losses to a top 10 team. And again, it was by 3 points. And it just shows this SMU team, remember, first year for them in the conference too. So the fact that they're making this type of statement right now, Rhett Lashley's really figuring things out with this team. And yeah, they've got things going. And then to go back to the Louisville Clemson game, I was basically on Saturday last week, and I was trying to just keep up with both those games, the SMU Pitt game and the Louisville Clemson game. And it finally got to the point where, like, at halftime, I was like, do I need to keep watching both of these? It feels like these things are already getting decided. Clemson just completely had a stinker there. And it was, again, Clemson's been playing really well, especially after the Georgia loss. But after Louisville's first couple drives, it's like, okay, yeah, this is happening. And watching Louisville up close when Miami faced them on the road, again, they went toe-to-toe with Miami all game. And again, all of their losses so far are against ranked teams, and they were all 1-score games. So like you said, Louisville was due for a big win against a ranked team. They finally got against Clemson, and it's shaking things up a lot. And now it's really, the conference is basically a 3-team race between Miami, SMU, and then whoever ends up winning the Clemson Pitt game down the road, because whoever wins that game would be the only team not named Miami or SMU to have 0 or 1 loss.
Right.
So if Miami or SMU slip up down the road, whoever wins that Clemson Pitt game is going to be the only other team that's really going to be back in the picture down the stretch.
Yeah, that's kind of the team waiting in the wings in case somebody screws up down in these last 3 games. But yeah, I kind of knew, going back to the Louisville game, that 4th down that Clemson gambled in their own territory and Louisville stopped them in the 3rd quarter. Right at that point, you kind of knew. And then later on, obviously, they weird decision to not go for 2. It stays like a 12-point game, and then Isaac Brown just breaks one, like I saw him do a bunch of times at Homestead. Cool to see him doing. And he saw it against Miami.
I saw against Miami. Yeah, Their first big touchdown was looked at and went, and it was like,
Uh-oh.
oh, that's Isaac Brown. Yeah, that's expected. That sounds about right.
Yeah. He. It's funny because I always felt like Homestead kept him fresh for a lot of years. They didn't give him the ball a lot, just enough to do damage in games. Then senior year he kind of did, but he was built like a fast tank. Like he's just still like upper body strong, and just when he breaks loose, it's a shame Miami couldn't get him. But in that game, you saw the talent, and again this weekend against Clemson. But looking at it overall, I mean, a big one. I think probably, and I said that I think a couple of weeks ago, the toughest of these 3 games remaining for Miami is this week. So if they clear this hurdle, you don't want to look past the last 2. But if they clear this hurdle, even better shape when you think about the big picture for the Canes.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, Wake Forest is Wake Forest. Syracuse at the start of the year, I thought, okay, they have a chance to do some damage here. They were in the top 25 for a little bit, but a lot of their wins have been very close against teams that probably shouldn't be close if you're going to be one of the contenders. Right. But again, it also just goes back to, as we've seen a lot in college football, especially this season, don't really count anyone out because you never know what might happen. We've seen it a lot this year with just all the various upsets, all the teams that you go into the season going, yeah, they're probably not going to be much to worry about. And then you just see how everything's just jumbled together. I mean, again, with the ACC, we sort of have a bit of a clearer path with, again, the 2 teams who were undefeated in conference play. But when you look around a lot of the other conferences, just to look back at that big picture, you got the Big Ten, you got Oregon who's undefeated, then you've got Ohio State, Penn State as one-loss teams. You got Indiana you got to figure out. Again, Indiana going to Ohio State, that's going to most likely determine who the second team is in that conference championship game.
Yep. And then you look at that offense right there too. Another team that just exploded this year.
Absolutely incredible to watch what they've done this season. Then you look at the Big 12, it's BYU in the field now. Considering, again, Iowa State lost last week. Kansas State has 2 losses now. Colorado has a chance to surprise and actually make it to a conference championship game. They still have a path in there. And then the SEC, everyone has at least one conference loss now that A&M got absolutely spanked by South Carolina. So
and there goes exactly. There went the last undefeated team, and a lot of examples like that. I mean, that game, Texas Tech nips Iowa State on the road. You can't let your guard down. Kansas State lost at Houston last week. I mean, like you said, we're here saying all that about the Miami's remaining schedule, but you can't let your guard down. Yeah,
and again, anything can happen. And again, I feel like I say it every week, for the fact that this is the first year for the 12-team playoff when the field kind of feels as open as it's been in a while. Yeah. Again, this is setting up for what could be a very entertaining playoff. When we thought about it last year when they announced it was going to move 12 teams, everybody going, oh, why does it matter? It's just going to be a bunch of teams getting smoked in the first round, this, that, the other.
Right.
I'm not so sure this year.
Maybe not. Again, maybe not all. Not all of them anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. When you have potentials for some of these big matchups, like when you look at it, just what this field would be if the season ended today, the first round matchups would be Ohio State against Boise State, Texas, Alabama, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Tennessee, Indiana would be your first round matchups if the season ended today.
And you know what? That's not a horrible matchup for Indiana if you're going to face them against any SEC team. Yeah. Then Texas, Alabama, you got the intra-SEC matchup there. Penn State, Notre Dame, pretty much on par. Yeah. You want to see what Genty can do against Ohio State for sure.
Yeah, I do want to say there is a rare scenario where, let's just say the hypothetical of Miami gets the first round bye and their potential path, there is a way where their first 2 games could be Ohio State and Notre Dame in some order, and then Mario Cristobal's former team in Oregon in the national championship. There is a potential path for that being what Miami would have to go through.
Look at you getting people excited.
Yeah. Again, we got to start thinking. Again, I got to start thinking about what things are going to happen. And if something like that does happen, boy, that's going to be fun.
Let me tell you, if there's 2 teams that are on Miami's hate list, it's those first 2 you mentioned right there. So that would be tremendous to say the least.
Yeah, for those, and then it gets the hypothetical of Mario Cristobal versus the team he left for his first national championship.
That'd be crazy. Yeah, that'd be absolutely wild.
But again, that's thinking way far ahead. That's 2+
many
months
upsets
down the road.
Yeah,
we've got a lot that we have to figure out before then.
Miami has to have 4 good weeks. I'm counting the ACC championship because there's no guarantee if they don't.
You have to.
You have to win the title to get there and be in that cushy spot.
I mean, especially considering when you look at what the rankings are, Miami's the only ACC team in there. SMU is ranked 13th. Despite everything they've done, the fact that their one loss is to BYU, the committee still had them as the first team out.
Right.
So that's something. And they're the first team out, and also the first team ahead of them is the current number 5 conference champion, who they're assuming. Yeah. So you would, even if they flip spots with Boise State, they would still be the first team out because that 5th conference champion needs to be in the field.
There's no guarantee whatsoever that if they're 12-1, I don't care if they lose on a last-second field goal. If they're 12-1, losing the ACC title game, they could very easily get left out. So that's a must. They have to treat it as a must-win. It is a must-win. And then look at all the upsets. They got to take care of business the next 3 weeks. Another one we didn't mention that wasn't an upset, but almost. Look, the Gators almost went in there and beat Georgia. That game was 20-20 in the 4th quarter. Could have easily been another upset in the SEC. So it's dangerous out there with all these teams. Doesn't matter if they're ranked, unranked. So Miami has to keep steady, keep consistent these last 3 weeks if they want to get into that ACC title game and then eventually the playoff. But hey, the possibility of Mario versus Rhett Lashley, that's another one. That would be interesting to see as well. So, but we'll talk more about that next week. We'll get the recap from. We'll talk about Georgia Tech. Jordan will be in Atlanta covering the game, so check out all his work at MiamiHerald.com. Check it out anyway now during the week as a prelude to Georgia Tech. And as far as this show, Eye on the U, we'll be back next week with more Hurricanes coverage. Until then, we appreciate everybody who has watched us and continues to watch us. You can catch us on YouTube or at MiamiHerald.com. For Jordan McPherson, I'm Andre Fernandez. Enjoy the weekend's games and have a good one, everybody.